to Exploring and Embodying Inclusive Leadership, the October monthly meeting of Female Wave of Change Canada. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge you all for taking time out of your busy lives to be here. This evening, through an interactive, engaging process, you will better understand what it means to be an inclusive leader, consider more deeply how to support all women in their leadership, discover why it is important to bring your whole self to your role as a leader, explore why inclusion is an important component of leadership, and finally, understand the impact of race and racism on leadership and organizational culture. As mentioned, this evening is brought to you by Female Wave of Change Canada. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Pam Thompson, and I am honored to be the ambassador for Canada of a global social movement called Female Wave of Change that is now in almost 50 countries. Now, Female Wave of Change, what we're all about is we believe and come from a place that authentic feminine leadership qualities hold the key to creating a better world, a more conscious, equitable, just, sustainable, and peaceful one. And you may be wondering when I talk about authentic feminine leadership qualities, what I mean. I mean qualities such as creativity, collaboration, authenticity, inclusiveness, as we're speaking about tonight, intuition, a lot of qualities that are associated with the feminine. That said, men can learn and have these as well. And as I mentioned before, when CJ came on, he's the brave man who's with us tonight. We do have men in our movement, our global movement, just so you know. And we believe in the importance of the masculine and feminine dancing together, if you will. However, we are on a mission to increase the number of authentic feminine leaders in the world and to create a better world, one that's more focused on people and planet over profits. Although we know as business people, a lot of us, we still need to make money, but it's time to focus more on people and planet. So to that end, we actually have 5 pillars at the international level as part of the Female Wave of Change Global, and they are economy, environment, education, health, and humanity. And my vision in Canada is to create pods in those 5 areas. And I'm excited to share that right now we have an environment project that is moving through, has been co-created by members of our, there's about 6 of us that have been working together since late June. And we're co-creating an educational program for girls aged 9 to 12 called the Mother Earth Ambassador Program that will integrate Indigenous wisdom and learning and teachings, as well as be open to a diverse sector of young girls. And we're now in discussions with a Canadian university with master's level, with the director of a master's level program to have a student or students help us flesh out that curriculum. So we're quite excited about that very concrete activity that we're launching. And we're looking forward to launching others in the different pillar areas as we move forward. So as a number of you are new, and this is your first time with us, I thought it might be helpful to tell you a little bit how we tend to have our monthly meetings. I do the initial introduction, and then I introduce the speaker, and I have about a 50-minute conversation, or we have about a 50-minute conversation with the speaker that has been co-created with them in advance. And we open up during during the conversation to you from time to time to provide input as well. Then we go into breakouts where you have an opportunity to meet other amazing women and some men that have joined us, and also to deepen the discussion. Following that, there'll be a brief share about the benefits of membership and how you can become a member, and then we'll close, just so you know. I'm just looking down. Someone just said, CJ definitely should be here. And I'm really pleased that you are. Mm-hmm. So just welcome. Right? Okay. So it's my pleasure to introduce you tonight's guest, Annemarie Shrouder. Annemarie has spent more than 20 years in the field of diversity and inclusion as a facilitator, consultant, and international speaker. A diversity and inclusion expert with a master's in bias awareness, Annemarie inspires awareness and connection. Whether she's presenting to an audience, leading a workshop, consulting with a client, or writing, she creates opportunities for people to see more of each other, themselves, and the world around them. In so doing, she facilitates an opening to create spaces where people feel a sense of belonging and connection, where they can learn together and be all of who they are. These are the spaces where real change can happen for people, organizations, and communities. She's been a keynote speaker at annual general meetings for the Girl Guides of Canada and Caledon Community Services, and has spoken at events such as the Women's Economic Forum in India, the Ontario Association of Student Midwives Conference, and many others. Annemarie assists in the creation of healthy workplace communities through her signature methodology and inclusive leadership program, which we'll hear more about tonight. Organizations turn to Annemarie when they're looking to build environments where people can learn and are supported, and where they are seen, heard, and valued. Clients include Scotiabank, FreshBooks, Toronto Catholic Children's Aid, Dufferin County, and various law firms in Ontario. Annemarie works with diversity broadly and is passionate about healing the racial divide. She also delivers presentations and can be booked for speaking engagements that inspire people to see more and raise awareness about the importance of inclusion. So give us a hand for welcome in, Annemarie. We're so happy to have you here.
Long bio.
Well, you know, there were so many good bits, I didn't want to take too much out.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Pam, and everyone on the call. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So Annemarie, let's kick it off.
Okay.
Inclusiveness is one of the qualities of an authentic feminine leader. Why is being inclusive so important for leaders and their organizations today?
It's a good first question. So maybe I'll just segue a little bit, Pam, and start with like, what is inclusive leadership? It's the quality of bringing an awareness, a level of awareness and openness to your work as a leader that allows you to see, quote unquote, notice, pay attention more to the people on your team, not just who's there, but also who's missing and how to increase representation. So inclusive leadership allows us then, when we put that hat on or put those glasses on, it's a quality, it's how we lead. And what it allows us to do is acknowledge the people who we're leading more, recognize them, value them, listen, and incorporate their knowledge and wisdom into what we're doing. But even before that, it allows us to recognize how much we might be missing in our approach as leaders, because we're really well versed in who we are. We see the world in a very particular way. We experience the world in a very particular way, but we don't know everything. And so as leaders, it really behooves us, we know this, to listen and to, create environments where people can contribute. And so authentic leadership allows us to acknowledge who's with us and create spaces for them to share their perspective, which then contributes to what we're doing as an organization, as a community, as a group, to move forward in a way that continues to be more and more inclusive and invite more and more people into that space.
Thanks a lot. And I just want to raise the point that having facilitated in environments all over the world, what I know to be true is the more diverse a group you have, the more creativity and innovative ideas emerge. So in addition to creating spaces in general, that's what I've found to be true. So to welcome and include as a leader, to create the space and include diverse opinions and ideas and perspectives is really valuable, particularly now when there's so many complex issues in the world that we need to deal with.
Absolutely. And you made a very, very important comment there. You said creating the space, because diversity alone does not give us the innovation and the creativity and the different perspectives. We can have all sorts of people at the table, but if the space isn't inclusive, if the space isn't safe, if people don't feel valued, if they're not heard, then it's just aesthetic. So that's the D in the D&I, right? And the D is relatively easy to get sometimes not, but
Right.
more easy than inclusion. But if you don't have the inclusion piece, it just looks good.
Totally. And that's where a lot of organizations are today. So I think it's really timely we're talking with you this evening. So what elements do we need to focus on to embody inclusive leadership? You've mentioned a few, but is there anything else, like creating space? Is there anything else you'd like to add to that list?
Yeah, well, the big one for me is awareness. As leaders, you know, there's lots of skills that we have that we could list out what a leader is, what a leader does. But awareness for me is a foundational element if you want to become more inclusive and practice inclusive leadership. And that awareness happens to be the foundation of my signature methodology, the A and the ABCs of inclusion. But the reason why I think it's so important is twofold. One, we definitely want to be aware of who's on our team, in our organization, right? Like look around, and if I look here at the squares, like who's here, who's here from what part of Canada, and what could you be bringing to the table? Yeah, that's really important. We also want to be aware, and I alluded to this earlier, of who's not here. So who are we missing? You know, in this case, geographically, what part of Canada might be missing right here today in this conversation? And then all of our various identities that we bring, who's missing in terms of demographic representation. So that's the outward facing. The inward facing part of awareness is we want to be aware of who we are. We want to be aware of the different identities we carry and the impact of those identities on how we lead, on what we see, on what we notice, on what we miss. That's a critical piece of inclusive leadership, because without that lens and that self-reflection, it's one of the things I hear often, and it's a buzz phrase now: we don't know what we don't know. I think that's becoming more and more common. You probably all have heard that at some point in the last little while, which is true. But when you add that lens of awareness, you're more in tune with the fact that there are things that you don't know. Yeah. And sometimes as leadership, especially when we are in positions of power, it's easy to just boldly go and create policy and create programs. And we take all of our best selves to that. And even in doing that, we're going to miss some folks. Yeah. So when we're aware of, we call this social location, when we're aware of our social location, which identities do we carry? Are they dominant group identities with power, with social power? Are they non-dominant groups with less social power or no social power? How do we move through the world? We can then use that awareness to better understand the needs of others, and that we're going to miss stuff, and we're going to need to create spaces to hear from the people on our team and beyond what they need and what we're missing.
Yes, and I'm sure you're going to get into more detail. How do you create those safe spaces as we move forward? But why is it important to bring your whole self to your role as a leader? I really like this question, actually.
Is this your question?
We developed this together.
Well, there's two ways to answer this question. There's the individual perspective, like what's in it for you to be able to bring your whole self. You know, and if I were to ask any of you on the call, I'm sure you'd have a long list of reasons that probably starts with something like, well, it feels good. It feels good to be able to bring my whole self to what I do. It feels good to be able to show up. It feels good to be authentic. It feels good to talk about who I am and to be able to use all of my experience in how I lead. That's gold, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that when we're able to bring our authentic selves and our full selves to any situation, we connect more, we engage more. It's more fun. Right? You're not checking yourself and trying to do the smoke and mirror thing. When we talk about workplaces, there's a newish term that Catalyst Canada has created called emotional tax. So when we aren't able to bring our full selves to work, it's stressful. Or to any situation, doesn't have to be in the workplace. It's stressful, right? We have to be cautious. We may be watching what we say. We may not know how we're received, and so we're keeping part of ourselves back, and that's a lot of work. It takes us out of conversation because our mind is busy trying to navigate safety. And then with all of that in mind, for organizations, think of all the amazing things that we lose out when people can't show up as who they are.
Yes, totally. I'd like to throw this question out to the group and have people, you can feel free to raise your hand with the icon or just raise your hand. I'll just take a couple here. Do you have anything to add to this question based on your experience? Why do you think it's important to bring your whole self to your role as a leader? Any reflections, any lessons, anything to reinforce here? Anybody? Somebody's got their hand up, but I can't see who it is. Oh, there we go.
Meredith and Fiona and Suzanne unmuted herself.
Okay, so Fiona, do you want to start?
Sure. I think it's making yourself vulnerable and being uncomfortable with the uncomfortable when you're actually showing up, and it's showing that you're genuine and that you're not perfect. And I think that's the start. If we do that, that opens up a lot of options for other people to become vulnerable and open.
Thank you, Fiona. Meredith, Meredith, do you want to go next? Welcome. It's been a while. You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's really nice to see you. I just think it's really important for authenticity, you know, that, and that's similar to what Fiona just said. So I think, I think what, you know, Annemarie is talking about is about that sort of authentic leadership and bringing your whole self and acknowledging, you know, the biases that you bring into a space and being really open about that. So I just actually sent an email to a colleague today saying, you know, I'm not a particularly collaborative person, actually. In this process that we've undergone recently, I wasn't collaborative. I don't actually collaborate particularly well, but I'm really happy that you provided this information. And she was super supportive. And I said, you know, I think it's because I'm an only child. And she's like, I've got an only child, so I think I understand. And I think that's just, that openness is really, really important in leadership.
Thanks, Meredith. Yeah, and sharing your vulnerability. There's a share in the chat here from Jazz. Whole self helps us to be present in difficult conversations. I liked what Fiona mentioned about being uncomfortable and creating space. Now I'll take one more share. I can't see all the hands. Somebody want to unmute that has something to share? CJ, hey.
I think being vulnerable, but if you don't bring everything to the table and open up yourself, you can't expect others to do the same thing. And in order to learn from others, you have to see the other, whether that's the whole person or otherwise, and you can't expect that from others if you don't do it yourself.
Totally. No, that's a really good observation.
Can I jump in for a second, Pam, before you go on to the next
Certainly.
question? Possibly. That's a vulnerability is a thing now, right? We're talking about it a lot. Brene Brown that's her thing, and I love Brene Brown. I use Dare to Lead in my leadership program, and vulnerability is so important as a leader because we model that for our teams, right? We model that for the people that we're working with, and vulnerability feels different for different people because of what it requires in addition to how we navigate the world on a daily basis. So if you are part of a historically disadvantaged group, asking somebody from a historically disadvantaged group to be vulnerable is a whole different ask than asking somebody from a dominant group with social power to be vulnerable. People from historically disadvantaged groups or marginalized groups, or there's many different terms that we use. I like historical disadvantage because it reminds me that we become marginalized. We're not born marginalized, we become marginalized by society, right? We get pushed out to the margins. But Brene Brown talks a lot about armor in her books and the cost of armor and what we lose when we armor up and what it costs in connection. Folks from historically disadvantaged groups, people of color, people who are Indigenous, people who are Black, and other historically disadvantaged groups, we armor up to protect ourselves every day. And so asking someone to be vulnerable, it's a different ask. Not saying don't do it, but you know, as inclusive leaders, we want to be aware of what we're asking somebody to do and the cost of that for somebody. It might not be our cost and we might not recognize that. So that's an example of that awareness piece that we want to bring to our leadership.
Yes.
Not everybody's going to be having the same experience in the same situation.
Thank you for adding that important piece, Annemarie. How has being a biracial person, just so you know, Annemarie has a father who's Black and mother who's Austrian and white, quite blonde, is she not? Or she was?
No, she was a long time ago.
Was. So
She was.
of the two, right? So in her book, she brilliantly brings out how challenging it was because she didn't feel like she fed into the Black world or the white world. So yeah. That was, to me, I learned a lot from that whole, being brown in a black and white world, Annemarie's book. So yeah. So how has being a biracial person and also queer shaped the work that you do?
It totally shapes the work I do in many ways, probably many of which I don't realize because I'm me. It's just who I am. So this is how I do the work. But yeah, my dad's Jamaican, my mother's Austrian. There's probably few cultures that are more diametrically opposed in many ways. And I think that's allowed me to see the world from different perspectives. And there's many really reasons why all of you could be doing that too. It's not just about race. But for me, growing up in a household with very different cultures and very different ways of navigating and experiencing and seeing the world, which was not always fun, but what I've learned from that and what I've come to appreciate about that was that it allows me to see things from different perspectives, not just as a practice, but also, I'm a person of color, but I'm also a light-skinned person of color. So I have privilege in addition to understanding what racism feels like and looks like. And so I've spent my life sort of constantly moving back and forth, not Black enough for the Black kids in school, not white because I'm not, you can tell. And so like, where do I fit? Where do I belong? And that's been a really painful process. I talk about that in my book because I put it in there because I thought sharing personal experience always helps to make things more real and relatable. But it's taken me my whole life to get to a place of both and, which maybe we'll talk about later. So I can't not do this work by informed in that way. I have to come at this work through that place of different perspectives. And what I love to do is to help people understand, okay, now if you look at it from this way, like even just do it in your house right now, wherever you're sitting, like if you sit this way and look at the room, you're going to see something completely different. And then if you turn this way and look at this part of the room, you're going to see something else, right? And so that's like having a conversation. We have to like remember that there's other things back here that we can't see. And so I love this part of the work. I think it's the part that I have the most fun with is helping folks to navigate what you're seeing and what you're experiencing isn't everything. And some people are seeing and experiencing some profoundly different things. And if you're just looking this way, you're going to miss all of that. How can you bring that into the conversation? How can you there's the creating space again. How do you create space for people to share what you can't see? And then how do you use it, right? That's the second part of inclusive leadership. It's not just about welcoming people. It's not just about really acknowledging and hearing. We have to use the information.
Totally.
So queerness is, it's another aspect of my identity and it's invisible. So you can tell I'm a person of color, but depending on, you can't tell that I'm queer necessarily, right? Depending on how I do my hair or who I might be with, or if I have a partner. So that gives me another entry point into marginalization and historical disadvantage, because invisible minority groups, there's a different challenge there because we're not seen. So people might not think we're there. And so then there's a whole other layer of inclusion, because you have to remember that not all diversity is visible. So yeah, that's a little bit about that.
Okay, well, no, I think it's really helpful for us to better understand different perspectives. So in your book, Annemarie, you share that in workplaces, we need to build community. And how can we best do that?
Well, there's lots, lots of, I'm be a little bit distracted, Pam, because I'm seeing questions in the chat. Do you want to stop and look at those, or do you want to?
Someone just raised their hand as well.
Fiona had her hand up.
Fiona just raised her hand, and Suzanne had something. Fiona, do you want to do a share right now in terms of a question or something you wanted to share?
Yes, certainly. My mother was Black and my father was Scottish. And I am obviously biracial, and I could pass for Black or white if you didn't know. So it's interesting sitting in that side of the fence, if I could put it that way, that when you're in a room full of people and there is various different comments going on, you can see it from different perspectives. And then when you challenge in a professional way, it's the reaction that you get. Because quite often I get the reactions, oh, you're Black. I would never know if it was only just your hair, or comments like that. And I also have a hidden disability as well. So I'm quite, I guess, I share stories and try to get different viewpoints across. So I think that's interesting. So I can really relate to what you were actually saying earlier. So thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for sharing that. It's really helpful. I just want to also go to a place. One of the things I found really helpful in Annemarie's book is she wrote poetry, and they're about different points in her life, Annemarie. And they really, even though they're not long, it's more like it's prose. They really, what should I say, unveil the emotion that you felt at the time as a young girl or at different points of your life. So thank you for that, because I feel like story, yes, is very powerful because there's an emotional component, but poetry as well, it can be very, it can really help create understanding and connect with others in terms of people's pain and emotion. So thank you for that. I see that Suzanne also wanted to answer the question with another question about the cost of bringing our whole selves as a leader. Suzanne, do you want to share that now? Are you okay to do that? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I see you there.
No, that's okay. I just immediately when I heard why it was important, I think, following what Annemarie said, you can list many reasons for why, but there is absolutely a cost in attempting to bring your whole self to work. And I was, just reflecting on how much are you willing to, how far are you willing to go in expending that cost to bring your whole self to work. And in addition to that, there's a lot of literature coming out that's talking about imposter syndrome being more an indicator of the safety in the workplace than it is in inadequacy or self-doubt within the person, which goes back to that cost of bringing your whole self to work. So I just, I wanted to throw that in there just for some reflection on. It's a nice question, but it's a loaded question for someone like me who goes through much of that emotional tax, Annemarie, that you were talking about, of how far do I want to go.
Thank you, Suzanne, for sharing that. And actually, Annemarie, what I'd like to do now is go to the question on the challenges of Black women, and then we'll go back to the community one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Nice segue based on what Suzanne's just said here.
It is. Thanks, Suzanne. And I was trying to Google because I can't remember the name of it, but Brene Brown. Oh, wait, here it is. Brene Brown wrote a book. So Brene Brown, like I said, talks about vulnerability, and I love Dare to Lead, but she doesn't have a D&I lens. That's not her thing. Yeah. So many of you might know there's a new book that she's written with her friend Tarana Burke called You Are Your Best Thing: Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience. Looks like this, if you can see my phone there. It just came out this year. I haven't read it yet. It's an anthology, but I thought, oh, good, hooray, because it feels completely different. And I think as women, just that one part of our identity, we know that there's a cost when we are vulnerable, because it can be used against us, because we're pushing against barriers and the glass ceiling. But if you add Black to that, or a person of color, or Indigenous, or any other visible, right? But skin color, we know It's a particular barrier in this country and in North America, right? And globally, for all the reasons of history and colonization. And so
yeah, I'll just ask a question to get out there. So the question that we were going to explore is, what challenges do Black women and women of color face compared to white women in the workplace? So that Suzanne's share really segued nicely into that.
Yeah, so I think, think about the women's movement and who was involved in the women's movement, who was at the forefront of that. And there's been, there are communities left out of that, and we've heard rumblings about that for years. But even now, gender equity, we've moved the dial on gender equity in a number of ways. We're not as far as we need to be, certainly not. But when you look at who benefits from that moving of the dial around gender equity, it's women who are white. Yeah. So Kimberly Crenshaw years ago coined the term intersectionality specifically to talk about the intersection of race and gender. Yeah, because Black women and women of color and women who are Indigenous are not just dealing with sexism, they're dealing with racism as well. And that's a compounded, it's a compounded experience, right? All our identities touch and intersect, and our experiences are going to be different because of that intersectionality. But race is a big one, for lack of a more eloquent way to say it, right? It really shapes our experience in North America and globally, again, because of colonization and systemic racism. And so Black women and women of color and Indigenous women are pushing up against sexism, they're pushing up against racism, and they're pushing up against racism from their peers, from their female peers. Yeah, not just men against women, but in terms of sexism, but we're also pushing up against our peers in terms of racism. And we see that all the time, so we have to be aware of that. And we have to be aware of the way that society has structured our awareness or lack of awareness of what systemic racism looks like, how it plays out, and how we participate in it without even realizing that we're doing that because of how we're socialized.
It's interesting what you're sharing here. I had a colleague years ago when I worked at Health Canada, a very brilliant, older Jamaican woman, Black Jamaican woman, and she had an idea for a children's mental health unit, and it was her whole vision. And her director basically said, "Oh, don't worry about typing that up. Just write that out in freehand and share it with me." She had the vision, she had, the mission, she had the number of full-time equivalents she needed to run it, and gave it to this director who typed it all up and sent it in as if it was her idea. Then this director had the audacity to not even include her in the interview process for being the unit lead. She just totally discounted her, even though it was all her ideas. It was just, I couldn't believe it. In fact, I ended up leaving the organization after that, even though I was in that division. I just this is toxic. I can't be in an organization that does this, right? I'm not saying all Health Canada does that. I'm not saying that, but even still, I just thought, I felt so bad for my friend, and it was, I believe it was, and she talked about how hard it was her, even in Jamaica, as a white woman in a British sort of colonized area, and how she had to work all that much harder to get ahead.
Yeah, and that story of from your friend at work is a story that I hear all the time. In addition to, can you fill in for this role because the person has quit, and you're asked to fill in for the role, and you do it for a certain number of months, sometimes even years, and then the role gets filled, and you're not invited to right. And you don't have to be Black or a person of color to experience this, but there's an extra layer, right? So then you're not invited to apply, and then they ask you to train the person.
Oh, that is
what? And then just recently I had a conversation with somebody who said, when I brought it to my supervisor, because we're working with an organization and they're exploring what anti-Black racism looks like in real, everyday life. And I brought it to my supervisor, and she said, well, maybe you can shore up your skills by doing this project. And the project had the exact same qualification, requirements that the job did, that she didn't. It happens all the time. And when we point things like that out, we get all sorts of reasons why that's not what we're talking about, and we have it wrong, and it's and we're, you know, making it up.
Right, right. Somebody's just put in here, can you address code switching? And when you shared with me when we had that conversation, that's the first time I've heard that term. Somebody's asking you here, and Natasha says, can you address code switching?
Yeah, code switching. I'm happy to. And if anybody else wants to jump in, feel free. Code switching is, what's a brief way to describe it? Changing how you do things, how you talk, how you act at work, versus how you talk and act at home, with your peeps, with your people. And it's a phrase that's been, I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe it was coined in Black communities because we need to do that, right? We need to know how to, I would say many marginalized communities have to do this, but you need to know what the code is to be successful in that environment. And that might not be how you do your life on a regular basis. Not saying that it's wrong or better. I'm just saying there's a way that we're expected to be. And so we might switch our language. We might switch our, just how we carry, or like just how we are, how we show up. And that comes at a price.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody have anything to add to that, their experience with code switching? Anybody? I don't see any hands. So I think you've covered it really well there, Annemarie. Now I think it's good to sort of bring on, we've talked about sort of the challenges. Now let's go back to that question about building community. So in your book, you share that in workplaces, we need to build community, and how can we best do that?
Yeah, and I think this is another one of those questions we're going to ask people to lean into after. So I'm looking forward to hearing how you're doing it at work. Community is another piece of our methodology that we focus on. For me, because I believe that this work is, we have to use our head, we have to learn things, we have to unlearn things, but this is heart work we're doing, right? We're opening, and we want to make sure that we acknowledge people and take in all of who they are as best we can. So building community to me is an important component of inclusion, because we create inclusion over time. We don't do inclusion. It's not a thing you do. It's the thing you create, and everybody has to be involved in the creation of an inclusive environment. So how are we going to do that if we're not building community and getting to know each other? That takes us from that intellectual exercise of this is the right thing to do to the, oh, this is going to benefit the person down the hall, my cubicle mate, or the person in the office, or the clients that come in. Like it just makes it more personal, and it's personal work. So how do we build community? We get to know each other. We create opportunities for people to connect. We don't do that as much as we used to, and we do it even less now because we're busy seeing all of each other on screens, right, instead of in person for a large part of our lives, depending on where we live now. So the challenge is, how do we make space and time for people to get to know each other, for people to ask questions, for people to learn together, because that builds community. Right? How do we create cultures of learning where it's okay to ask questions and not know something? Or to say, I don't want to talk about that today. Not today.
Yeah.
Too much. Can't do it today.
Set boundaries. Yeah.
Boundaries. Yeah.
I'd like to throw this one out to the group. What strategies have, because we've got a broad array of folks here from different places and backgrounds. So what strategies have you found useful to build community in your workplace, in your business, in your nonprofit? Somebody want to raise their hand on that one? Any strategies you found really helpful to do this, other than what we've shared, or to reinforce what's been shared already? Natasha.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to apologize. I'm on the couch because I overdid it in nature walk today. So I just didn't have the heart to go to my office when I got home. I haven't moved since I got in.
Well, good for you to go on your nature walks. That's really important.
I just went a bit overboard because I was having such a grand time. Um, I've actually just recently transitioned out of working full-time in a certain environment, but some of the things that we did, we had challenges at work. So we had like little raffle tickets and people put in like a bit of money, and we would do different challenges monthly to get ourselves moving, to show kindness, different things like that. And then we would meet over Zoom to talk about how we did. And I just found it got people chatting because we were all coming into work, going into our offices, and then on a screen all day long. And so it was preventing us from feeling as connected. And I work in social services. I'm a therapist. So it's hard not being with the people, but of course, we're in the pandemic. And then something that I really didn't expect it to go the way it did, but it ended up being a random idea that worked really well. We had a day where we just brought in something. We did Friday, something that bring you joy. And I love stuffed animals. And I brought in a little yellow bear that I had. And when one of my colleagues' dad passed away and we weren't touching each other, I gave it to her saying this was a hug bear. And for the next year plus, that bear moves around the office for anybody who's having a hard time to represent our colleagues giving each other a hug so that we can still keep our distance, stay safe, but to communicate our care and concern. And we just found it worked really well. And I've actually now started sending hug bears in the mail to friends when they're having a rough time, because it's amazing how it's like a real life emoji, I guess, right? It's amazing how far the gesture has gone because people are missing touch, but what can we do in its stead? And this was one of the things that we came up with that we could do in its stead.
Natasha, what a great idea. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's lovely.
No problem.
It's awful. And I see Jazz has said something here. Take someone's perspective, listen, be patient. We'll make mistakes, acknowledge your mistakes, find the right tools for processes. The big thing about our mental modes that locks our biases and don't buy into stereotypes. So she's got a bunch of stuff there, which is really helpful, I'd say. Anyone else want to share how they have strategies they found useful to build community in their workplaces? Anybody else?
I can say something. I work for an employment services center, and we have about 50 staff members, super diverse backgrounds. And when anyone sort of in our staff meetings on a weekly basis, somebody will suggest to have a one-on-one coffee date. So you'll have like a one-on-one chat with one of your colleagues over coffee, just to have like, not necessarily about work, but just to kind of, just have a chat, catch up, get to know people, get to know what they're working on, especially when you're working in an environment where there's so many different departments or services that you offer. You don't really have that connectivity of being in an office. So that's something they do. And then on Fridays, they send out an email to praise one of their colleagues. So they'll write testimonials from clients they've helped, or how they were, a valuable asset to the team. So things like that. Or, somebody on a team meeting will say, you know what, go out today, have a walk, enjoy the sunshine. And I think that kind of has an impact on people's sort of well-being, being at home all the time. So those are some things.
Thanks, Nadine. Really appreciate you sharing those. Deb, do you want to share? You're on. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of things. I worked for an organization and the manager was really big on surprise and delights. And so, as she called it, surprise and delight. So, for random acts of kindness, whatever you want to call it. But it was a hug. It was a way just to show someone that you were caring. And during the last year and a half, with lacking the personal connection that so many of us have had, one of the things that I started was I love to bake. And so I would just bake little mini banana breads. And randomly I would tie it all up in a little bow and put it on somebody's doorstep. Here's your banana bread love for the day. And it was just, again, like I think it was Natasha with the yellow bear, you know, something that you didn't really expect would create the impact that it did. And it's the amount of connection that has come out of that seemingly small random act has just been so incredible. It's been really lovely. So, you know, sometimes those little surprise and delight or random acts of kindness as ways to build community and break down barriers and, you know, show leadership, it just turn out so much differently than you expect.
Thanks, Deb. And I think what you just shared, the banana bread, and what Natasha shared, the bears, it's really about making people feel special and valued.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do enough of that certainly in our workplaces, we don't.
And heard.
Have you done the metrics? Have you met your goals? It's not about really making you feel special, right?
Yeah. And it's about feeling heard as well.
Totally.
You know,
Definitely.
you're extending that yellow bear, that package of cookies, that banana bread, that whatever, because you recognize that something has occurred. And so you want them to be heard and valued. And yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Donna, you've got your hand up. Would you like to share?
Well, as a relatively new resident of BC, moving from Alberta in 2015, late 2015, and we have moved 5 times in the 5 years that we've been here, from Osoyoos to the Oliver area to Penticton. And it was really hard having a, one woman business, meeting people, working all day in your home-based office. And initially I was doing in a lot of wellness shows and fairs, and it was easy to connect to a lot of really wonderful, engaged men and women. And then COVID hit, and now you're home-based and you're stuck there. And one of the things that I did was join Penticton Women in Business, because in all of the other cities and all of the other career positions I had, I was in Rotary, I was in Lions, I was in Chamber of Commerce. I wasn't in anything specifically geared to women in business. And joining the Penticton Women in Business Association here in Penticton has been life-changing for me. The diversity in both cultures and careers and personal lives has been so inclusive, inviting, everything that Annemarie has been talking about. And that made me spread my wings and join the Balance Wellbeing group in Kelowna. And that's a mixed group of men and women in many different aspects of business. And I've seen more leadership and more inclusivity and more willingness to step off of ledges and connect in those 2 groups than I've probably seen in my whole life. So, if there's a local women's group anywhere near you, I'd recommend trying it. And that's one of the reasons why I joined FWOC, because I thought, wow, this is even another level, another layer. And so I just wanted to share that, and thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And one woman here who's built an amazing women's business network community is Deb Alcadino, who just shared. And she started the West Shore Women's Business Network, I'm going to say, is 11 years ago, Deb? And it's an amazingly warm and welcome network. And so kudos to the Women's Business Networks for sure. I'm just looking at our time, and Meredith contributed that she has a Skype chat where we share everyday events, family highs and lows, personal challenges, sickness, politics, etc. But she feels that community is really shaped by leadership. So good leaders are really critical in the building community piece. So
Pam,
yes.
I think all of these are such great ideas, and they're so powerful. And what they speak to is, I think someone said it already, seeing someone, acknowledging someone, right? Paying attention. And we can do that in very small ways too, right? Stop by somebody, if you're working in person, you stop by somebody's desk and you say hello, right? You take 5 minutes in the beginning of your Zoom call and put people in little groups to have them chat with each other, or one other person to have them. It doesn't have to be, banana bread and bears are awesome. Like, I love it, love it. And it doesn't have to be that, it's not complicated, but small things make such a huge difference, right? You hear somebody's having a bad day, you stop at their desk, right? You send an email.
So true. So true.
How are you doing today? So little and big, we need both.
Well, I think we can continue this discussion for hours, but unfortunately we have some time constraints here. So I'd just like to thank you so much, Annemarie, for this discussion and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with us and getting us thinking and learning more about this topic of D&I and equality. And if people would like to learn more about you and your work and how to get in touch, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I have a website, which is my name, Annemarie.Shrouder.com, just like it's spelled here on my little window. You can find me on LinkedIn. Those are the two places that I am most findable, I think. So yeah, and I look forward to chatting with anyone who'd like to do that. And thanks for having me, Pam. It's been great.
Thank you. And Annemarie also has a really interesting inclusion insight. So if you sign up for her list, she sends an inclusion insight every week, and I find them really helpful. So
yeah, find that on the web.
And she's not leaving us. She's staying till the end. So.
I'm here, yes.
So now I'd like to move over to the breakout session. And Barb Edie, way to change secretary is going to help with setting up crowds. But before we go there, I'd just like to tell folks what we're going to be doing. You're going to have 10 minutes total in the group. There's going to be 3 people in your group. So you roughly each have 3 minutes to share. So introduce yourself. And then the 2 questions are, does somebody want to put this in the chat for me? What new ideas or understandings did you gain this evening from our featured guest? So you answer that question. What new ideas or understandings did you gain this evening from our featured guest? And how do you see applying what you've learned today in your work and in your life? So how do you see applying what you've learned today in your work and in your life? Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. So they're in the chat, the 2 questions. So what we're going to do is Barb is going to put you into groups. And what we ask is the person with the longest hair starts sharing who they are initially, a name, their name and a bit about themselves, and then answer those 2 questions. And we also ask that you choose a timekeeper at the outset who on their phone times the 3 minutes, because it's easier, then you know, and you may have a little bit of time at the end or not. And then also at the beginning, identify one person who's going to share potentially with a larger group. So somebody who feels comfortable taking notes so that we get your ideas. And so when we come back, we'll be sharing those. So Barb, over to you. Now, I think you're already co-host, so I think you can set up the breakouts, correct?
Yeah, Pam, I've set them up. So I'm just going to open all the rooms and everyone should get a little message to join a room. And then, yeah, I'll call everybody back in approximately 10 minutes. So that's about 3 minutes per person. If there's 3, there should be about 3 people in the room. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to open them and then I will call everybody back in about 10 minutes. Here we go.
Thanks, Barb. Here we are. I'm just responding to messages in the chat. Here we are, Barb. Oh.
No, it's because we're both co-hosts. But
That's
if you want, you can join a room. If you want to, you should be able to join a room. Or maybe only the host, only if you're the host.
Don't worry about it. But let's just, in case we're getting recorded. So do you want to have a go here? We know who we are.
Sure, you and I can have our own room.
What new ideas or understandings did you gain this evening from our featured guest?
Wow, I loved a few things, a few highlights. I was going to say, not all diversity is visible. I think that's really important. Because, you know, we think of the obvious, right? Sexism, racism, ageism, those tend to be visible.
Yeah.
But to me, that's important to remember. It's not all visible. And also on the inclusion piece, asking who's missing. Yeah. I think it's very interesting to say, oh, look how many we've included, but who's missing? Yeah. And often it's like a community person or like a key person or element is missing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so I thought that was great. And I didn't know the expression code switching. I had not heard of that before, and I didn't know what code switching was. But I think it's certainly, I see how it applies women, you know, Black women, many people, you know, the gay, lesbian, queer community as well, men even, but how all of us, yeah, but certain disadvantaged groups or minorities especially, yeah, we have to, or we feel we need to switch our behavior or who we are to use this code, you know, the code of being successful, even the dress code like that, you know,
Yes.
and, you know, a lot of people take that very seriously. And it's like, come on, you know, back to showing up as your whole self.
That's
You know,
right.
it's
That's
an
right.
interesting piece. Anyway, those are just key takeaways for me.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And what
How about you?
about how do you see applying what you've learned today in your
How would I apply it? Well, again, awareness, right? Being
Right.
aware of those things in my own leadership or networking or my own work and coaching, you know, including the work I plan to do with teens. Like I said, not everything is visible, you know, the diversity or the vulnerability piece. The cost for one person to show up as their whole self may be very different than it is for another.
Yeah.
You know, so I think again, it's awareness and sensitivity for, and I love the whole essence of all of this is truly seeing that person,
Yeah.
right? And seeing that other and appreciating the differences we can see and the ones that we can't. Perhaps we can't. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
You know, in
point.
Africa, there's this beautiful expression called salbona. And when you say it, it's like a greeting too. You say salbona, and it means I see you.
I see you.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah,
That's
it's gorgeous.
beautiful. I just want to make sure you're keeping track of the
Yeah,
time.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. That's great. Yeah, I just, you know what's interesting for me that comes up, because, you know, I've worked in, well, you've traveled a lot, but I've worked in a number of cultures and in different countries and stuff. And what always comes to the fore for me is how similar we all are, rather than all the differences, you know? And so for me, if I see a person and I think, oh, well, they really care about family and so do I, or, you know, they want to belong and how can I make them belong? They want to be respected. How can I respect them? To me, if we all live that way, we wouldn't have near the issues we have. But what happens is we tend to, because someone is Black or someone is queer or somebody is different from us, we think they're different from us, but they really aren't. They need to armor up more, probably because of all the trauma they've experienced or they think they might experience. However, really, if we saw each other without the skin color, but we just saw each other from our hearts or our souls, the world would be a way different place, right? It really would. It really would. So yeah, that's what always comes up for me. You know, people will say, well, those people are really different, whatever. I'm like, for one, I get really curious. Like, I'm really curious, why do they do that? That's where it's not like, what do they do that for? It's like, oh, that's really interesting, because usually there's a reason, and often it's a historical reason based on, it could be based on health or social mores. Like, just think about it. Muslim culture, hot countries. Just think about it. If you have to wash 5 times a day, it's a little bit over the top, but then you don't smell and it prevents infection. And if there's lots of people around, you're not stinky, right? And even going up and down and prostrating yourself, it's exercise. It's actual physical exercise when you have to do that stuff. Keeps you flexible into your old age, right? I mean, think about it. And like stuff like in the Jewish culture, not eating pork. Well, you know, if you're in a hot country and you ate pork, you died, right? So, I mean, all these things, there's usually a reason for them. And I find it quite interesting when we peel away those layers and think about that, right? There's always a reason for stuff. It's like, it's usually not out of the blue, right?
No. And again, you're right. It can be cultural, historical, it can be personal, as you said, health, it can be upbringing. you know, again, people were talking about being an only child in their
Yes.
family, not
Yes,
being
exactly.
and feeling not heard or not seen, or yeah, so it can come from all kinds of places. But I think in this case, yes, in some ways, again, they're obvious, you know,
Right.
they're visible. And in other cases, who knows another person's journey, you know,
Exactly.
or life experience, right? Back to their feeling the need to armor up or to switch codes or to withdraw, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
You know, and even the whole bigger things that affect many of us, and whether it's women, but colonialism, like you were describing your Jamaican friend, and this British, you know, idea that permeates much of Canada and our systems, politics, institutions, government. And it's that idea that, oh, thank you for your idea, meaning the marginalized people,
Yes.
the white privilege.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We'll take it and run with it.
Yeah, it was mind blowing to me when that happened.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, but you're right, it's not uncommon. And whether it's from, again, a Black woman or a woman, or I'm not saying it doesn't happen to men as well, perhaps,
Right.
you know?
Right.
But yeah, again, it's that, yeah, just that comes from a cultural, historical perspective. You know, we know better, or thank you very much. I know who can lead this, and it's not you, but thank you very much for doing all the work.
Well, exactly. Yes, we don't want to profile you, but yeah, thank you for.
Well, and we don't even want to offer you the job to lead the vision you created. Like, that's not only audacious, that's insulting. And yeah, again, it's racist, sexist, all of the above, but you know, that's what we're here to change, right? So we've got about a minute left, and I'll call everybody back.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. There's
I really enjoyed Annemarie's, like, even creating this with her, because I knew her from years. Did you know her through the EBC? Evolutionary Business?
Oh no, that's why her name sounds familiar. You know, I recognized her name, but I've never had any direct interaction with her through the EBC.
Yeah, I actually went to an event. Well, that might be the one that I met you in Vancouver.
Yes.
The Vancouver one, and we ended up going for lunch one time, or
beautiful.
beside each other. So that's how I got to know her. And then, you know, I kept in touch. And when I knew her book was coming out, I said, you know, how can we support you in this way, and sort of thing, you know? And anyway, yeah, no, I'm so glad. It took me a while, because she's been spending a lot of time in Barbados, because I guess her dad's parents, her grandparents, are there. So that's why she's not spending time there, so that her daughter can live in a Black culture too. Predominantly, there's a lot of, you know, Black folks in Barbados. Not totally, there are white folks there too. But
I know, back to the colonial piece, but yeah, interesting. All right, well, we're at time for me to call everybody back, and sometimes it takes about 60 seconds for everybody to return. But here we go. I'm going to close the rooms, call everybody back.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, everybody's been given a minute to come back, so we should see them soon.
So then we've got at least 5 minutes for shares.
Yeah, 5. Yeah.
At least 5 minutes. What have we got? It's 5:38. And
about 7 minutes. I'll do it for about 5 to 7 minutes till 1:45, or.
Yes, I guess you can. Yes, because we said 20 minutes from 5:25, and we started about on time. So there we go. So about 7 minutes. Great.
Okay. Here we go. People are coming back now. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Deb, Donna. We'll just wait for everyone else to return. And then we'll have a little debrief or little sharing session on some of the insights.
Is everybody back?
It looks like it. I think so.
We got 26 people back. Did we lose 10 people? I don't know.
A few people, I think, left before the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Anyway, welcome back, everybody. I think everyone's back now. Again, I'm Barbara Edie, and I just, after these breakout rooms, we just like to have an opportunity for people to share. And we find a good way to do that if one person in your group can just sort of be the spokesperson and share a few insights and takeaways. And we usually do this for a few minutes, but a little 5 or 6 minutes. So would anyone like to start about sharing a takeaway or insight? There's Deb Alcadino. Go, Deb.
I might as well just jump in.
Yeah, jump in.
Hi, Barbara. Good to see you.
You too.
I had a lovely conversation with Donna. Thank you so much, Donna. Lovely meeting you. Some interesting observations for the two of us. I think the most powerful one was actually the last one that we chatted about, and that was in this digital era that we've been living with over the last couple of years, that it has become very one-dimensional, that we're not seeing all of the person because we're not face-to-face. So we're missing a lot of the D&I things that we might have been more aware of. All we can see is neck up, right? Headshot up. So if there's a visible disability, we're not seeing that, right? So our lens for diversity and inclusiveness is very one-dimensional. You know, certainly we can see if there is a difference in skin color, but other than that, our lens is smeared, as Donna said, right? It's not clear. So we feel like we're not seeing the whole person in order to be more inclusive and be more be more inclusive and more aware with the diversity and inclusive lens.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, Deb. That is beautiful and interesting observation. And it brings to mind, for me, something that Annemarie said as well, that not all diversity is visible.
Correct.
So that's like a second layer, right? Now it's making it even, well, it's more difficult. You're right. It's a much more singular lens if this is the only experience we're having, like we are right in this moment, actually. So thanks for that. And important to remember that not all diversity is visible and what that means in a digital world. Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to share something key or go ahead, Michelle Rogers.
Great. So we had talked about the emotional tax. So just having to change who you are, who you bring to work, as well as creating space. Another big one was how women treat other women. And so it's almost, it's very much like against the sisterhood, not being a good sister. And so that's really, you know, I think that actually is, you know, almost wounding to be very dramatic about it, but it's disappointing. And so when we talked about how to apply things that we've learned today, we talked about signing up for Annemarie's weekly tips or awareness, and then having a drip feed to find opportunity to start incorporating that into our daily lives, as well as bringing our more authentic self to to the party, but also being comfortable with making other people uncomfortable because there's definitely that risk or opportunity when we do become a little bit more transparent or authentic, that some people aren't going to be comfortable with that, or just pushing back on something that isn't isn't cool. you're preparing yourself to create an uncomfortable situation and being okay with kind of going there. So I thought it was a really good discussion.
That's great. Thanks, Michelle. That's like creating space for the discomfort as well as creating space for other things. And I love what you said about the emotional tax, because that came up in the discussion that I had too with Pam, actually, about remembering people have different stakes at risk in showing up as their whole selves or their true selves, right? So that would be the most ideal world to live in if we all could do that. But really important things to remember. And about the sisterhood, building community. Hey, let's work together rather than against ourselves. And great idea, sign up for Annemarie's inclusion tips and insights, and let's put them to use. So thank you for that. We just maybe have one more quick share. Anyone else like to add anything that really struck them? Any hands up? Or okay, go ahead, Denise. Do you want to just jump in and mute yourself?
Okay, our group, yeah, we were chatty.
Cool.
It was Deborah Rubin and Alexandra and myself. Really great conversations about just, again, some of the new things, new ideas, and the language that, that we discussed today, and just in terms of giving words to the understanding to what code switching is, and really having that richer understanding of historically disadvantaged peoples and intersectionality. But as we were talking about that also, and bringing in some of the other parts of the conversation, it's also really interesting, like how the world is changing and how things are emerging. Everything from what we are now seeing on television and in our culture. And some of that is, being now mainstream, and things that are maybe the little kids that are, 6 and 7, that versus all of us at our ages are going to be just seeing as normal, whereas all of us have really seen a progression through time. But at the same time as that we've seen this progression through time, we're also at a point where things are still a little uncomfortable. Things are, we're emerging into a new paradigm. And so we were just kind of starting to get into that, a little bit of that discussion and sharing a bit of my perspectives on it. But I really believe that that's true.
Yeah, we are in a new time and many new paradigms, certainly. And what children are seeing today that, wasn't the world that most of us grew up in. So thanks for that. And thanks for the reminder about code switching, because that was one of my takeaways. I'd never heard that expression before. I certainly have practiced it myself, quite honestly. But yeah, remembering that for other people, we don't know someone's story and about, why they may feel they need to switch who they really are, for historical, cultural, and all kinds of personal reasons. Okay, I think that's, I know, Shannon, you have your hand up.
We can take one more.
One more? Okay, Shannon, go for it, and then we'll move on.
Okay, thank you so much, Barbara. And I know you said the last person, but I'll be really quick. Our group had great conversations as well. We talked a lot about psychological safety and all of the other things that people have talked about already. But I think one of the consensus that we came to was this felt like it was just the start of a conversation that we needed to continue. Like this was, we were just sort of getting into it, and we're learning so much. Some people in our group had more experience than others, but all of us felt so engaged in what Annemarie was saying. We just really felt like this was just the start of a conversation. So yeah, again, Annemarie, thank you so much. This has been, I can tell our group learned lots and had lots of great takeaways. So thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for sharing that. And of course, the importance of psychological safety, back to a safe space, right? Because who is really going to be themselves and contribute and lead if they don't feel safe? So thank you for that. And start of the conversation. And Annemarie, I guess we have to have you back. So now, I was going to say over to you, Pam, but maybe we'll go straight to, I think, Christina. Are you ready to share? Yeah, okay.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, hopefully technology is kind to me today. Okay, can everyone see this?
We can see it, Christina. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And I'll take a second here because I know Pam will close up, but I just wanted to thank Annemarie for joining us today. One of the best sessions yet. So thank you very much for your time. I think I would just wanted to spend a few more minutes explaining more about who we are and how you can help us. Female Wave of Change Canada is part of a global movement with a clear mission that intends to create a better world for all of us. And then really at the core of who we are, we're trying to build a more connected, more conscious, more sustainable, and more humane world. Our hope is to reshape the future by using our feminine values and feminine energy. And we lead by our core values and offer, we talked about a safe place. So we offer a safe place where everyone can be their authentic self, where we want to empower women to grow into change makers. And I think we all can say that's something that the world desperately needs right about now. At Female Wave of Change Canada, we're building a vibrant community where we're filled with authentic feminine leaders, where we want to come together and offer leadership development through coaching and consulting, where we use our collective voices to create and implement social impactful events or lead projects and programs. But we can't do this alone. So in order to do this, in order to build this amazing platform filled with collective voices and diversity to influence change, we need change makers. So let me ask you this: are you change makers in your community? Are you, mission driven? Are you looking to make a difference or even perhaps give back to your community? Then join us. We need you. We need your voices. We're looking for influencers or leaders, mission-driven women who are looking to make an impact. And some of the ways that you can help do that is lead projects, share your knowledge, expertise or experience. It can be under the form of blogging, content, as well as create an event or co-create an event. There are a million ways in which you can really lend your voice. And one in particular, Pam had mentioned earlier about our pods, right? So help us grow those pods. Either by co-facilitating, bring some ideas, or there's so many brilliant minds on this call today alone. Imagine if we all came together, what that power would look like, right? So that's really the call. The call is to join us, be part of this movement. Let us, help reshape this future. What does it look like? You're participating in a global community of diverse women. Just look at all of us on this call today. Help lead a project, as I mentioned. Lend your leadership skills, your development, your mentoring, and return that back to the community. Mentor someone else who's looking for that. How many times have you spoken to other women leaders who've expressed, interest in being mentored or want to mentor someone else? And this is the platform in which we can do that. So the membership is $100. It's for the year. If you want to know more, go to FWOCcanada.com. I have to come up with a better acronym other than Female Wave of Change. I'm going to shorten it up somehow. Which I'm sure everyone will go right after this call and they'll sign up. But make sure, for those of you who do sign up, make sure to click on the sign up for the newsletter. And we don't want to miss out on any opportunities of communicating to you some of the upcoming meetings, as well as some of the amazing programs that we're all working together. I hope to see you at our next meeting, and thank you all so much for joining us today. It was a fantastic session. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina. And just before we close, I'd just like to share a little bit more about some other things we have coming down the pike, so to speak. One of the things we did at the recent AGM, annual general meeting, was to have a brainstorming session and to share some potential ideas of new ways people can get involved as members. And one of the things we talked about that seemed to really appeal to people were collective wisdom circles. And so we're planning to roll these out probably in the new year. And they still have to be fine-tuned, but the idea is we have a lot of wisdom amongst our women, and we have these monthly meetings where you have a little bit of time to interact, but these would be opportunities to share with probably about 8 women in total in these circles. About once a month we would have them, for example, and some of them would be about certain topics. People could bring their leadership challenges to them. They would be confidential, for example, or it could be a theme like inclusive leadership that people would share and explore in this time. So anyway, that's just an insight. As we grow, we're wanting to roll out more things and offer more member benefits. So Thank you so much, everyone, for coming here tonight and for your active participation. We really appreciate all the input that you shared and the richness of the discussion. I'd like to also once again, thank you, Annemarie. This is an area certainly of much interest, and thank you very much for the important work that you're doing in this area and for giving us a taste of the work that you do. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Just so people know, as in some of you may have seen the promotion, Annemarie is giving away one signed copy of her book. So we're not going to announce the winner tonight, but my understanding is we'll announce it and the book will be sent to you in November. Is that correct, Annemarie? We're looking down. Yeah, so you'll have to be waiting with bated breath to see if you wanted, if you came out tonight, because it's only people who actually came, not just people who signed up. So anyway, so thank you again for coming. I can't believe we're actually may end up leaving a little bit early. Annemarie, did you have any parting thoughts, a couple of last minute takeaways for people? Something like putting you on the spot, eh? Just say no if you don't.
No. Sign up for the newsletter. You'll get some parting thoughts every week. It's free, it's short, because there's an inclusion challenge. You can practice because it's all about, it's like playing an instrument or going to the gym. You have to practice. Yeah, because we're really well versed in what we know, and we're missing a whole, like, you know, the horses on the road. There's so much else. So we got to practice. We got to remind ourselves and practice. So there, now I thought of something.
Well, that's great. Thanks so much, Annemarie. Just want to say our monthly meetings are the third Wednesday of every month from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Pacific, 6 to 4:30 to 6 p.m. Pacific, obviously 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern. So for everybody. And the next month's meeting is on November 17th. And the topic is how to lead effectively in uncertain times without burning out. How to lead effectively in uncertain times without burning out. So stay tuned for that and look for us on social media and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you folks again. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.